It will probably help you to get a sense of what happened today, and maybe you could address two dimensions. One is this dimension of process. You know, how useful can business be in the COP process and in between, and then more of a substance issue, which is what would you like most to see from businesses who claim they want to move forward? I think we had a very bullish statement from Steve, who said, well, things we just must to do them. So if you could address those two dimensions, what you most expect from business, and then how does it fit in the process? How can we help the process?
Well, thank you, Claude, and good afternoon, everyone. I was recently at a meeting, for a change, about climate change in Chicago. And I was amongst all of these traders who kept talking about climate risk. And I thought that what they meant by climate risk is the risk of climate change. And it gradually became clear to me in the course of the discussion that they didn't mean the risk of climate change. What they meant was, by climate risk, was the risk of legislation and the risk of litigation. That's what they meant by climate risk. And I would say, I mean, the IEA alternative policy scenario that was referred to earlier on actually only takes emissions back to their 1990 levels. It doesn't take emissions to the -50 that the scientific community is talking about. So my suggestion would be that if you think the IEA alternative policy scenario is science fiction, then I am telling you that you are headed for extinction. And the reason that you are headed for extinction is because I believe that as climate change becomes more apparent, that there will be increasing political pressure. You're seeing it now already, increasing political pressure to get the emissions to -50 and not to stabilization. And I also think that some of the things that are being built today, some of the factories and power plants that are joyously being opened today, will still be operating in 2050. And if you're about to start building a power plant, then I would ask you the question, do you really want to think that that scenario is science fiction? Because I assure you, if you do, you will be working towards your own extinction. My suggestion would be, within the margins of what's reasonably possible, and I hope on the basis of good cooperation with governments, assume that you will be in an aggressive policy environment in 2050 and try and get your investments as close as possible to that scenario to make sure that your future is not about destroying capital stock, your future is not about closing plants down early, but that your future is based on anticipating the climate risk of litigation or legislation more intelligently than your competitors and being ready for that future. On public-private partnerships, I think that we have a unique opportunity within the negotiations that are going to be launched here in Bali to develop that public-private partnership. We have behind us a 2-year experience where, in a so-called ad hoc working group that talked about future industrialized country commitments, and in a broader dialogue on long-term cooperative action, we have seen an incredible change in the process that I work for, in that over the past 2 years, for the first time, we have seen the World Bank, the World Business Council, and a whole lot of other organizations for the first time coming into the process as full contributors, coming into the process to share their knowledge and expertise. And I think that this has really been appreciated by the governments that do the negotiation. And I think by bringing forward creative ideas, including this very useful paper on the utilities sector and how to take action forward there, I think that we really do have an opportunity over the next 2 years to engage business much more forcefully in terms of designing the future climate change regime. And I think we have that possibility even more in the first year. I hope that the first year will concentrate on developing an understanding, on dialogue, on really knowing what we want to craft, and that we won't immediately open the tin of lawyers and start negotiating legal text. So I think that there is in the negotiations an important opportunity for a public-private partnership, and I think that the World Business Council, like no other, has already provided input into that process. I think that process of a public-private partnership can be even more valuable if it's built on a private-private partnership. I think Bjorn and I have had a lot of conversations in the past about sectoral approaches. We know that the people making aluminium and making cement and making other things are thinking very creatively about how sectoral approaches, how agreements in a particular branch of industry can help to advance this process, safeguard a level playing field if such a thing exists. But basically, I think that there is an opportunity to think about sectoral approaches, a private-private partnership, as something that the private sector would bring to the table in a public-private partnership. So in addition to the work on the different sectors, I think the notion of sectoral agreements, whether it's towards a bottom-up regime or whatever, is a very important way of the private sector, in the case of a particular branch of industry, to say, this is what we can do, providing the right conditions are created for that sector, be it for companies in countries with targets or companies in countries without targets. So in that sense, I don't know if I hope I've done what you asked me to do. My key message would be, don't work towards your own extinction by thinking this is science fiction. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. That concludes the closing panel. A little bit ahead of time, but nobody will mind to have a little bit of, I wouldn't say fresh air necessarily, a bit earlier. But thank you again for coming and spending the time for those statements. We now have a high-level segment, and immediately I would like to introduce a very important person who has been taking notes all morning and all afternoon here. You know, you heard some things like that now climate and development are not antinomic. You probably 20 years ago have put on the map that environment and development were not antinomic, so it's in known territory. Dr. Gro Harlem Brundtland is here in her capacity as special envoy from the UN Secretary General, attended the meeting, and we invited her to share a few remarks at the end of this meeting. And the question is, I have put it sort of a heading for your title, is when you listen to all of this, do you think that this crowd here is up to a challenge, and what else should we do? So if you would like to take this lectern, there is better, well, the lighting is not, yeah, please. It's a question of lighting, really. Thank you very much.